Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this conversation with Mr. Armando Martinez, who's running for State House District 39. We are doing this interview in partnership with Futuro RGV, the League of Women's Voters, and McAllen Citizens League. Thank you so much, Mr. Martinez, for joining us.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us, Valerie.
Thank you. Just to start off, can you tell us what is the greatest asset of your district? And of course, the people, I'm sure, are part of it. Yes. But aside from that, what would you say is the best asset?
You know, and that was going to be my answer. The people of District 39 are actually the greatest asset that we have, you know. And then, of course, the fact that we have such a good and tight-fit community, and the fact that our culture is so great here in the Valley. I think that's one of the biggest assets. The family, the culture, and the people, of course, of District 39 is one of the greatest assets that we have.
Yeah, and definitely different culture from other parts of Texas. Yes. What would you say is the most important issue facing this district, and how would you address it?
You know, I think there's several issues that are important for this district, and I want to say healthcare and access to healthcare is one of the biggest issues that we have down here in South Texas. And you know, Texas is ranked last in healthcare and access to healthcare, and in the uninsured population, and that also quadrupled during the pandemic. And we saw that many people were unable to access healthcare because, of course, they lost their benefits through losing their jobs. When you couple that with education, which is extremely important, and we have some of the biggest and brightest students in the state of Texas that come from the Rio Grande Valley, that, of course, is one of the other issues. And then finally, probably one of the greatest issue, along with all three, is infrastructure and drainage. You know, we saw so many people that were displaced out of their homes and businesses after 3 torrential floods that we had here. We've asked and pleaded for the governor and for our elected officials and Republicans that are in office to help us fund a lot of these important projects of drainage, and of course that's fallen on deaf ears, but yet they could utilize a lot of that money for other issues other than the most important issues, which is healthcare, education, and infrastructure for the Valley.
Thank you. Once elected, if elected, of course, what would be the first piece of legislation that you have in mind to sponsor?
Yeah, absolutely. And once we're reelected again for our, you know, on another term, since we've been serving District 39, I think drainage infrastructure is going to be some of the main things that we're going to focus on again this legislative session. And of course, any type of educational opportunity and access to healthcare. I think those three are some of the first pieces of legislation that we're going to focus on because they're so important for the Valley and for the state of Texas, of course. But those are some of the pieces of legislation we'll be focusing on.
Thank you. And just going back to the last legislative session, there was a lot of controversy around SB 1, the bill that made changes to the election laws. Republicans argue that it was needed to ensure the integrity of our elections, while Democrats have countered that it is merely a voter suppression bill. What was your position on this?
My position was I was against it, and it was a voter suppression bill. It feels like every time there are larger numbers of Latino and people of color that are coming out and voting, Republicans try to take that step to suppress those votes to make sure that they don't come out and vote. Let me tell you how harsh it was. Is my dad passed away in April, and in the March primary, my mom had to actually physically put him in a vehicle to go and vote curbside. Why? Because his driver's license or his ID said Alfredo Martinez Sr. It did not match his Social Security card, which said Alfredo Martinez. Well, of course, when my dad was born and had his Social Security number given to him, he never knew he was going to have a son. So the ID and the Social Security number or card did not match. Therefore, he was unable to vote by ballot. So you see so many people that were affected by this, especially a 92-year-old World War II veteran who fought for our country, that was unable to vote because of the same issue. And when you think about the elderly that are in nursing homes and those that don't have a ride to get to the voting booth, you know, a lot of them don't have that access. And we should be making voting easier, not harder for people to vote. Yes, of course, we want to make sure that that the people that are voting are the people that are voting, and we're not against that. What we're saying is why continue to place obstacles and barriers in front of people when we should be making it easier? We already have voter ID laws. You know, so many people come out and they continue to talk about voter ID. That was passed in 2011. You know, so that's a moot point at this time already. You know, that was already passed. We already have laws in place to protect the voter. But at the same case, you're also having, you know, people that are going to be in those voting booths looking over the shoulder of people to see how they're voting and the way that they're voting, and actually intimidating the voter to where people aren't going to want to go to the polls. We shouldn't be doing that. Not at this day and age, not in the United States of America, and not in Texas. Texas has a long history of disenfranchising people and making it hard for people to vote and oppressing the vote. And they're just continuing to do that. Every chance that they get, they erode away the laws that we already have in place. And that is something that I will not stand for. And I can tell you, voting access and a person's ability to vote is not a Republican-Democrat issue. Right? It's a right that we have, that we should be able to exercise without fear and without the obstruction of somebody stopping us from doing it. And I will continue to be a voice for that.
A lot of folks, particularly in the Republican Party, believe that there was election fraud in the 2020 election. Do you believe that there were instances of fraud that happened more than normal, or?
Absolutely not. And that's the big lie from Trump that we've heard, and that's a continued rhetoric, and that's a word that they're going to continue to talk about. But when our own Secretary of State, who was a Republican, verified voting and said that there was no fraud that happened in the state of Texas, that is just a regurgitated statement that they want to continue to use to try and justify their actions to suppress the vote of the people here in Texas, especially people of color.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll move on to another topic here about the electric grid. In the winter of 2021, the state of Texas faced an unprecedented freeze and the failure of our electrical grid. Do you think the issues with our electrical grid could have been addressed, and if so, how?
I don't believe that the issues with the grid have been addressed. I think that there was people that have died that we have not addressed that issue, and our governor has failed to address that issue completely. Yes, we did pass laws, but we did not hold those accountable, which are those large corporations that actually could be making sure that our grid does not fail in weatherizing the grid, weatherizing the businesses that they are in charge of. So I think they have failed to do that. And when people write big checks, I think those that are in power, make those decisions based on that. And it should not be based on politics. It should be based on people and the fact that we need to take care of the people as a whole and not be dividing it up and saying, well, this corporation or that corporation. It's not about that. It's about making sure people are safe, have access, and the grid does not fail our people.
Thank you. Another big topic that's important for a lot of Texans is the right to bear arms and how to do so. So in the last legislature, there was that constitutional carry legislation, which was a bit controversial. It allows anyone at least 21 years of age to open carry or conceal carry a firearm in public without needing a special permit or license. Can you tell us about your position on that legislation?
So I was against that legislation. Yes, I am a hunter, and I'm an outdoorsman, and yes, I have rifles and guns, and I enjoy that. But when it comes to allowing just anybody to have a permitless carry, allowing anybody to purchase a weapon, which we saw the massacre that happened in Uvalde. And when you think about that, and we have so many issues that could have stopped that, and so many times that law enforcement had said, this is bad, we should not be doing it. But Republicans and our governor did not listen to law enforcement. They backed the blue, but not when it deals with arms, right? You've had so many people. My wife and I were both concealed handgun license holders, both of us. And we paid the permit. We went through the class. We had background checks. Those no longer exist. There are no background checks for people. Anybody could purchase a gun. So if you look at the percentage of people that did not qualify for a concealed handgun license under permitless carry, now they qualify to go and purchase a weapon. That is a safety issue. That is a big concern. And when it comes to our children, when it comes to our teachers, when it comes to our schools and our communities, I think we need to do a better job. And when I talk about we, I think the people in power need to do a better job. Because it was so easy for them to call for a special session on voting rights, on a big lie. But they could not call a special session to protect our children, our schools, and our teachers, and our communities, which is much more important than anything, right? Safety. So I have a big problem with it. And I am not saying that we should remove guns. No, I'm saying that we should have background checks. I'm saying that people that are qualified should have a class, should be able to carry. But there needs to be laws and rules in place that they must follow in order to get that, not just to let anyone go and purchase a gun at any time, because we will continue to see the issues that happened in Uvalde and across the state of Texas because of that.
There's a lot of, obviously, discussion on how to prevent what happened in Uvalde and other places. In the last debate with O'Rourke and Governor Abbott, there was talks about how O'Rourke wants to, he's promoting red flag laws, universal background checks, and increasing the age limit for purchasing these weapons. He believes that there is support on the Republican side for this kind of changes. Have you seen that with your colleagues? I've heard a lot of it, but I can tell you that many of my colleagues who are Republicans say, man, that would be great if we could do that, but I won't get reelected. It's all about a reelection issue, and that to me is a problem. We should quit thinking about getting reelected because we're for or against something. We should think about the safety of our communities, about the people, our students, our teachers. That is the most important thing. And I think a lot of us will get reelected because we make those hard choices, because we make those right choices, and what's important for our communities. I believe that's something that we need to do. And I have seen and I have heard, but I think it's very hard to get them to coalesce and to come across with something that they could support because of fear of the repercussions from their own party. Another topic that's really important for us here in the Valley is border security. It's long been an important topic in Austin and in D.C. The legislature has approved around $800 million biannually for the past years to support border security operations. And the governor recently announced that the state of Texas was going to fund a private border wall. What are your thoughts on the current state of our international border, and what kind of policies do you support in related to border security? First of all, I think when it comes to border security, we have funded that $800 million every year here in the Texas legislature. And that is a failure on the side of the Republicans. For them to come out and say that we still have a problem, it's obvious that what they are doing and implementing is not working. So there needs to be a change in the way they're doing it. They've been in power since 2003. For them to point fingers and to say that it's other people's problems, I think that is another big lie, because they are the ones that have been in power. They are the ones that have been funding this. And if there is not an issue that they are being able to stop, well, it's on them, not on anybody else. Quit pointing fingers. You've been in power to make these decisions. They have been there. They've been funding this since 2009. Funding these type of border security projects. And when you think about being last in education, last in health, in access to health care, when you think about people that have been displaced from their homes and businesses have been lost because of drainage, the state of Texas and the governor wants to fund a private border wall and construction before fixing the important things that are important to us down here in the Rio Grande Valley. And that is drainage, and that is infrastructure, and that's transportation, and that's healthcare, and that's education. Why are we not focusing on that? And it really bothers me when we have our leadership that come down here, and the only focus is the border wall and the border security and all these people that are coming across. But yet we have not talked to the people that have been impacted by flooding. We have not talked to people that were impacted because of the pandemic and their access to health care. We have not talked to our educators and given our retired teachers a cost of living adjustment that they have not received since the mid-90s.
our teachers and their pay is still not up to the national average. And these are concerns that we can address as a state instead of politicizing an event. Now, do we want the drugs? No. Do we want the arms? No, absolutely not. But when we talk about immigrants that are coming across into undocumented immigrants that are coming into Texas, those immigrants aren't the ones that are carrying the drugs. They're not the ones that are carrying the arms. And we are utilizing a lot of our resources to address that. But how many times have we talked about the drugs and stopping the drugs and the arms and where they're coming from? That's what our focus should be on, because that's not what we want. We don't want the gangs. We don't want the arms. We don't want the drugs. That's where we should be spending our money, along with spending it on education, healthcare, and of course infrastructure in the Valley.
Speaking about the source for those weapons, we do have a lot of straw purchasing problems here, especially focused in the South Texas area. What could be done to try and crack down on that problem?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that could help on cracking down on the problem, but now you have permitless carry, so now anybody can purchase a gun at any time. You've just given access to anyone to purchase guns. And when we would have any type of red flag laws and background checks and things in place, that could help curtail that. But yet it's very easy for them to point fingers and say they're all about the Second Amendment, which so am I. Like I said, I'm a hunter, I have guns, I go hunting, and my wife and I were concealed handgun license carriers. But at the end of the day, if we don't have background checks and we don't have ways to hold people accountable, that's exactly what we're going to end up having, is issues like those that you just mentioned.
Can you also tell us a little about inflation? So I'm sure that you and everyone else has noticed everything kind of going up. In 2021, the inflation rate was approximately 7%, and in the last month it was 8.5%, down from the 40-year high of 9.1 in June. What can the Texas legislature do to mitigate the impact of inflation on residents? And what are some of the things that you sponsored?
And I think a lot of that also, deals with the federal government and how they are going to address, interest rates and to help combat the recession, right? A lot of it also goes back to our economy and how we're doing and the access to goods, supply and demand, what we have in place. I think here in the state of Texas, one of the things that, the people in power have talked about for so many years is lowering property taxes. And every time they try to pass a bill or do something that addresses that, it never lowers property taxes. Now you have a governor that's saying that he's going to invest a lot of money from our surplus into lowering property taxes. But what's going to end up happening is going to starve our schools and our public school system, which is a big concern to us because we should be funding our schools and our education. We should be number one. If we're the ninth largest global economy, we should be number one in education. We should be number one in access to health care, and we're not. That is the problem. So I think a lot of that, first of all, we need to make sure that we have a great communication with our federal government and seeing how we're going to address that together, and then making goods and services available for our people at a much lower cost to where they don't have the impact of inflation and interest rates.
There's also been a problem with labor shortages across all kinds of industry. What do you think? Why do you think this is, and what policies are you in favor to address that?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot all over construction and in every industry that there is a labor shortage, and I believe we've seen that over the years, and it's continued to get worse. One of the things that we have talked about, and both Republicans and Democrats in the Texas House have said a guest worker program would work well. We tried to pass that years ago. Paul Workman, I know he was a contractor with AGC, and he a Republican from Austin, and he was one of the ones that was really pushing a guest worker program. I think by doing that, you allow people to come in and work. You give them access. They come in the right way. They're able to pay fees to do that. And of course, if they don't have anything negative in their background, the ability to go back and forth is there, and they could help address a lot of the labor shortage. I think we also need to focus, when we talk about education, on a lot of skilled workers and trades, and making sure that those are available to our students within the schools, so that we're losing a lot of trades. and people just need to have that education and that opportunity. We have some of the brightest students in the Rio Grande Valley, and I think making those opportunities available to our students through trades and skills to where they can go out into the workforce and help build that workforce once again is something that we need to look into.
These labor shortages also extend into our educational system. There's some estimates that 1 out of every 4 teachers are leaving the industry, rather the profession, due to stress from the pandemic, and there's so many other factors affecting them. What would you do to, or what are you doing now, and would you like to see happen in the next legislature to help them?
Yeah, so, and I think that's a very good question, Valerie. My wife's an educator. She's a 4th grade reading and writing teacher in Weslaco. And, you know, she sees the stresses and she deals with the stress daily with the students, and because of the effects of the pandemic and over time. And I think a lot of it also deals with pay and the amount of pay that they are receiving. And, you know, there are so many additional requisites that and requirements that they're placing on teachers, and testing and high stakes testing, and things that continue to cause stress within the teachers, but because they're trying to teach. And we have gotten away from the basics, from teaching the arithmetic, from teaching the writing, the reading, the important things that help build that foundation for the student. And we have implemented so many other requirements for our teachers to have to do, instead of going back and teaching the basics to our students, building that foundation and helping them grow. And I think some of the things that we can do is work on teacher pay raise, and also looking at the requirements that are in place to help our teachers to where they can cope and go back into the classroom and finally teach our students, instead of teaching to a test, being worried about a test, and being able for them to build that foundation for our students.
In the debate with O'Rourke and Governor Abbott, O'Rourke mentioned that he is in favor of doing away with STAR. Do you think that might be something that you could get behind, or do you propose other ways?
Absolutely.
To fix it?
Now, absolutely. And I think one of my Republican colleagues who just, he's not coming back to the legislature, Matt Krause, had also filed that last session to do away with the STAR testing. And you have a lot of people that are behind that. Now, do we need to have testing? Absolutely. Yes, we do. But I think there's other ways that we can do that. And that's where we focus on our teaching industry and them to kind of guide us and say, okay, this is how we can do it, in order to make sure that we do have some assessments for our students to make sure that they're learning and there's growth within the system. We understand that the pandemic had a large impact on us, and of course there was a slide in the learning process, but I think there's so many things that we can implement. We would need to really focus and work with the teaching industry to teach us how, and to actually help us understand what we could put in place. Because yes, we do want to do away with the high stakes testing, but there should be some assessments, and there's ways that we can do it to allow our teachers to teach.
You mentioned that the students here in the Valley are some of the brightest, and that it is a priority of yours to help with education, or rather to continue helping with education. However, the tuition costs kind of keep going up.
Absolutely. And
the Board of Regents approved, I believe it was a 2.1% increase last year, although they didn't approve any increases for this year. What are some of the ways to reduce those costs?
I think a lot of ways that we can help reduce those costs is of course, placing a cap, and also freezing rates at certain percentages. I think that's something that back in Rick Perry's term, they deregulated the tuition market, which kind of allowed for the fluctuation and this to occur. So I think there's a lot of things that the legislature can put in place in order to freeze those rates and make sure that our students do have affordable education, which is very important. And of course, making sure that we have opportunity for our students as well.
We've also talked about healthcare, but we could dig in a little bit more into it. The state of Texas has the highest uninsured rate in the country at 18.4. I'm sure you know that already. It's almost a double the national average. What are some of the bills already in place, or rather proposed, that could help change things in Texas?
And I think we've heard it all before, is the expansion of Medicaid. that would make healthcare insurance access and make it much more affordable. And I'll tell you why. Because now you would have more people that would be able to qualify for that. We would be able to draw down billions of dollars from the federal government, and that would also help lower the premium rates for a lot of families, especially the middle class families. We've heard it so many times that our insurance rates and our premiums are so high. Well, of course they're high because during the Obama administration, Rick Perry did not want to obtain those dollars from the federal government under, the Affordable Care Act. Why? Because a Democrat was in office, and we did not want to have those strings attached. But we've seen that other states have been successful with the expansion of Medicaid. And at the end of the day, when it comes to healthcare, education, transportation, infrastructure, it's not a Republican-Democrat issue. And we should not be placing politics in front of people. We should be taking care of our people, making sure that they have the access for that.
It seems like in this coming election, one of the most important topics, or rather for people, and that's motivating people to come out and participate, is the topic of reproductive health. So I understand you voted against the heartbeat bill, also known as SB 8, although Senator Lucio voted for it, and that allows for, that restricts abortion so long as a heartbeat is detected, and created a private rights of action against healthcare providers and anyone providing assistance in the abortion, which means they can sue, right? Can you tell us why you voted against it, and
Absolutely.
What can be done to further reproductive rights here in Texas?
Right. I think we had a lot of laws already in place that helped protect children and of course women who were pregnant. But I do believe that at the end of the day, it's a woman's right to choose with what she wants to do with her body. But when we think about this bill, there was no exception for incest or rape. So I do not feel that it was appropriate for a female to be forced, if she is a victim of incest and rape, to have to carry a child that she was a victim of, and I think that's something very hard. I am not a female, so I do not know exactly how females feel about that, and as a male, I don't think I should be making those decisions for a female. I believe that is something that a woman should have the ability to make that choice, and I am a Catholic, and I do practice, and I do go to church on Sunday, but I think that at the end of the day, it is a female's right to choose on what she wants to do, especially if there is no exception for incest and rape.
Given your background and your work history, what do you believe the effects of this kind of bill would be on women who are desperate for some kind of relief?
Yeah, I think it places hospitals in a very difficult situation. Me being a firefighter and being a paramedic and being a flight medic and transporting a lot of patients to different facilities, and of course encountering a lot of females that are that are pregnant or are having any type of issue that that we transport. I think it becomes a very difficult situation for a physician and for a facility in performing, whether it be a D&C or an issue to where the female has an issue. So I think it's something that just creates a very difficult situation for everyone as a whole. And I understand where this was going, but I don't think it was done in the right manner. There is some consequences that can occur because of it.
Just my last question here, and it's a little bit more, a little broad, right? You know how difficult it could be working with, rather being bipartisan and helping out, putting politics aside and putting priorities of your constituents first. But there's still a lot of division, and it's difficult to find middle ground. But what do you believe are some of the issues where Republicans and Democrats can agree on that perhaps could compel some change in the next legislative session?
I believe if you actually go back and you think about the important issues of Texas, jobs, economic development, healthcare, education, infrastructure, drainage, transportation. Those are important things for Texans. We want to make sure we have jobs. We want to make sure we have good jobs, good paying jobs, that our children are educated, and that our children and our families are healthy, right? And that we have roads and we have infrastructure and we have things that are in place in order for us to be successful within our communities. And those are the important things that Republicans, Democrats get behind all the time.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Martinez. Thank you for coming again. This was the conversation for the State House District 39. We were joined here by the incumbent, Mr. Armando Martinez. We want to thank again Futuro RGV for allowing us to do this in partnership with the League of Women's Voters and McAllen Citizens League. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, and thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, ma'am. Nice to meet you.